Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the October CAC meeting. I'm now going to turn it over to Dan, and he will handle the meeting duties.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate it. Welcome everyone to the October 27th meeting of the Community Appearance Commission. I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order. We'll get started with a roll call. First, John Coyne. Here. Okay, next, Curtis Walker. Okay, okay, got you. Salvador Patino. Okay. George Edwards. Here. Maninka Gupta. Brittany Clinton Hill. Brenda Fulmore, you're here.
Here.
Okay. Tasha Wilson.
Here.
Good deal. John Rothling. Ethany Good.
I'm here.
Good deal. Anton Musaf.
I'm here.
Thanks. Amanda King. And Judith Hotchkiss.
Here.
Okay, great. Yeah, as Amy indicated earlier, that's great. We have quorum. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. First item on our agenda, I'm very pleased to announce that we have a new member of the CAC, Brenda Fulmore. And she was recently appointed by the City of Winston-Salem City Council to fill one of our vacant categorical positions. And during our initial meeting, she also expressed interest in maybe joining the TAPR committee, which is great. Brenda, if you don't mind, could you just briefly for a minute, could you introduce yourself to the commission?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Brenda Fulmore. I work at Winston-Salem State as the Director of Supply Diversity, and I'm also board chair for Creative Corridors Coalition. If you notice our beautiful bridges that we have here in the city, the Green Street Bridge by the ballpark, the Strowway Bridge, and the Twin Arches. Creative Corridors was very instrumental in getting this done. From the design aspect to the P3, public-private partnership, raising the extra money needed so that we can have iconic enhanced bridges for our city. So I am privileged to be a part of this group, and thank you all for having me.
Great. Okay.
And thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Brenda. I appreciate it. We'll go ahead and move along to this afternoon's presentation on the local historic marker program. And our guest speaker this afternoon is Heather Bratland. She is a project planner at Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Planning and Development Services Department on the community character team. She's also the Historic Resources Officer at the Forsyth County Resource Commission. And again, Amy and I asked her here today to give an overview presentation on our local historic marker program. As Heather was talking about briefly before the meeting, we recently unveiled 2 new markers, one at the Oak Crest Historic District near Wake Forest University, and another one just south of there at the Renolda Park neighborhood. So Amy and I felt that the commission would have an interest and that it was kind of a relevant topic. So Heather, whenever you're ready, I think, are you able to share your screen or?
I should be. Amy gave me, hang on one second. Let me put myself in presenter mode. Okay. And share sound, share. Okay. All right. Okay. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So as Dan said, my name is Heather Bratland. I am one of 2 historic resources officers that are housed in the planning department. The other one is Michelle McCullough, but they asked me to come talk with you today because I'm the one who manages the marker program. So before our marker program launched in 2001, this was what our memorial landscape looked like. Starting at the lower left corner, we had the Confederate monument that was located outside the courthouse that was put up in 1905. We had the Daniel Boone Trail Monument that was put up in 1927 that's located near West End. The first state highway marker was installed in our county in 1938. Recognizing the importance of the shallow ford. We have the Mickey Coffee Pot near Old Salem, representing our Moravian history. And then the equestrian statue of R.J. Reynolds that's located near City Hall was installed in 1979. So those are some topics, that you would probably expect to see memorials about in a southern city. So in 2001, with the support of our elected officials, the city of Winston-Salem first approved a marker program, with the first markers being installed the following year in 2002. When the marker program was first started, we didn't have a competitive application process. Instead, the commission worked from a list of thematic priorities, and they selected markers from that priority list. There was a special marker installed recognizing the history of Memorial Industrial School in 2013 that was installed in the county. And then the county approved markers as an official program and began to approve funding for it in 2015. So we install 1 marker currently in an unincorporated part of the county, and then we install 2 markers in the city of Winston-Salem. So to date, we have 64 markers that have been installed. Another one will be installed in the county in the next couple of weeks at the Strobel Farm. So we have 7 currently in the county, soon to be 8. We have 2 in the village of Clemens, which are sort of an anomaly. They are what's called a certified local government, which means essentially that they are a historic preservation partner with the state and the National Park Service. And so when they award markers, they kind of run them through our program. So the most recent one we installed there was actually earlier this year for the Comfort and Peter Clemens House. And that marker was paid for part by the Clemens Historical Society, part by the village of Clemens, and then part by the former property owner in whose family the property had been for over 100 years. And then we have 55 markers that are in the city of Winston-Salem. So this map shows you, this is an interactive GIS map that's available for people to use on the Historic Resources Commission website that has layers for our National Register historic districts, our local historic districts and landmarks, and then our markers. So this layer is just showing you our markers. Our program has been really successful and has actually been a model for other communities in the state, primarily because we publicize it and we get the support of our elected officials. So here you can see Mayor Pro Tem Adams and Mayor Joines at a marker unveiling event for the New Bethel Baptist Church. We use social media. So at the top, you can see a post that we did to Facebook for applications, calling for applications. I believe this was from last year. We go on Twitter and we go on Instagram. We work with marketing to issue press releases about our markers. And then we send emails out. You all have probably gotten emails from me saying, marker applications are due, marker applications are due. And we include contacts in the local media on those emails. So earlier this year, the Ask Sam column in the Journal published something about marker applications and how people could proceed with doing a marker application, which was great, getting it to a broader audience. So over the years, we've developed a fairly comprehensive application document. Anybody can apply for a marker. So this is what our marker application looks like. On the second page, highlighted in yellow, you'll see kind of the key components. So we ask first for a statement of significance. That's a short statement that says, why is this place important? Why do we care about it locally? How does this contribute to our local story? We ask for additional documentation, which is really primary evidence, source material, things like photographs, historic newspaper articles, deeds, old plats, things of that nature. We do ask all of our marker applicants to come to our historic marker committee and make a 5-minute presentation to our committee members to talk about why they think they should be honored with the marker. It can be very informal. When Daryl Pauling came and spoke about his father, Loman Pauling, and the Five Royales, the music group that he was in, he just came and spoke about that history and told stories about his dad. And it was so moving. I mean, he didn't have a presentation. He didn't have any kind of visuals. He just talked. And you could tell that the love and the pride for his father was, gushing out of his heart and just in his everything about his demeanor. You could tell how important this was to him. But generally speaking, most people come and make a PowerPoint presentation, but we also have people make videos. Last year, we got a video presentation about the Winston-Salem Rescue Squad that was really well done and was a very good way to incorporate some of that primary source material and evidence into the presentation, because they could show us historic photos and articles about the rescue squad when it had been written up in the newspaper when it was first founded and did some big rescues. We ask the applicants to submit draft marker text. Sometimes our subjects have a broad history. And so we want to know what's important to the applicant, because the markers themselves don't allow you to say a whole lot. So what's the most important critical thing that you want to communicate? And then we ask for a map of the marker installation site, because if a site is very large, sometimes there will be a particular spot on that site that is significant to the history or to the person. Marker applications are taken in once a year. They're due on Halloween. And then the marker committee meeting will be held in November. So our committee meeting is scheduled this year for November 15th, 17th. It's a Wednesday night when the committee will be accepting or hearing from applicants. So our marker committee meets annually to receive and vote on historic marker applications. They then make a recommendation about the marker awards to our full Historic Resources Commission, who are the ones that actually make the final determination. Although we've never had, in my time here, we've never had the commission reject the recommendations of the committee. They review the marker text, and then they attend our marker unveiling ceremonies and help staff hosting those. We have 2 to 4 members from the commission, one of whom is the chair. And then we have 1 to 3 members from the community at large, so we can get a broader subset of voices. So over the years, particularly as the marker applications in the city have gotten more competitive, we've developed a fairly robust scoring criteria or set of scoring criteria. So the first is the required criteria. So whatever it is that we're recognizing, the person, the site, the event, it has to be over 50 years old, which is kind of the standard national framework for when something is considered historic. And if we're recognizing a person, it has to be posthumous, because we don't want to kind of get into battles about the legacy of someone who is living. The site can't currently be marked by another marker program in Forsyth County. So we have had some suggestions that we should put up a marker for Idols Dam, but it is already marked with a state marker. So that wouldn't qualify, particularly because, again, our program is competitive. We want to share the wealth and recognize so many sites rather than doing multiple recognitions for a single subject. The proposed marker location has to be in the public right-of-way, and it has to be in public view. I will admit that in my time here, there have been a couple instances where the marker was moved a few feet out of the public right-of-way because of particularities due to the site. I mentioned earlier the marker for Loman Pauling and the Five Royales. There was no extra right-of-way. At that site, it's the street and then it's the sidewalk, and there isn't anywhere really to put it. And so we put it in his yard right off the sidewalk, but it makes it more complicated because then we have to develop an easement agreement that allows the city to have access to the site to install it and to maintain it in perpetuity. And then finally, is a historic marker an appropriate form of recognition for the site? In my first few years with the city, we had an applicant who applied for a marker to be installed near the county courthouse that would add context around the Confederate memorial, which was still there at the time. Trying to explain the history of sort of the lost cause narrative and when all of those Confederate memorials were put up, some many years after the Civil War. That was a very controversial application, even at the committee meeting, and it had it been awarded, I'm sure it would have been much more so. So the committee did not feel that was a historic marker was the appropriate way to deal with the issue of the Confederate monument. And so if a majority of them said no, a marker is not an appropriate way to recognize the history of this site, then it would not qualify. So in terms of then scoring and evaluating our markers, our highest priority items tend to be about recognizing local history that's been largely ignored. So lesser known historic site, event, organization, or person. We don't have a marker for Old Salem. We don't have a marker for the Reynolds building because those are things that everybody almost who comes to Winston-Salem is familiar with. The Colored Baptist orphanage home that was located in the Bellevue neighborhood, on the other hand, is something a lot of people may not be familiar with. It was only on that site for 25 years and then moved to become Memorial Industrial School. There's no physical remnants of it left. So that's underrepresented history. Underrepresented history and historical narrative can relate to African-American history, women's history, LGBTQ history. We haven't had any markers for that, but that's a new type of history that maybe will be recognized in Winston-Salem in the coming years. And an underrepresented historical narrative could be our music history or our automotive history, our furniture history. You know, we talk a lot about tobacco history. And of course, we have a lot of industrial history here with Haynes and things like that. But there are other parts of our history that are less talked about. A building or site that has been demolished. We have many, many markers for sites like that in the city. The Depot Street Graded School, the 14th Street School, the Zinzendorf Hotel are all examples of markers for sites where the building is no longer extant. And then finally, a historic or cultural event at a specific site. We have a marker for the pond, which was an African-American neighborhood that was flooded when a reservoir kind of north on Liberty Street failed and it flooded this neighborhood. 9 people were killed. And people who historically resided in that neighborhood have had reunions and sort of continue to remember that history, but many people know nothing about it. So the pond is a good example of a marker that recognizes a site where an event happened. We also have one at Reynolds Plant 64 that recognizes the labor strikes that happened there. Our middle criterion are for an endangered or threatened site. The Bethania Freedmen's Community, which is located along Bethania Rural Hall Road. That is a community when formerly enslaved people moved off of the plantations that surrounded Bethania and got their own land, built their own small sort of subsistence farms, or maybe lived but continued to work for pay on some of the larger plantations. But that was a historically Black community that developed along Bethania Rural Hall Road. And there are many sort of communal and family ties that interweave the families that lived there. So when that land was annexed into the city of Winston-Salem, many of the historic buildings that were there came under threat because of minimum housing code enforcement. And so it became clear that we needed to develop and better understand within the Planning and Inspections Department the history of that area, but also recognize it and make it more visible on the land that this was an important place that had a lot of history. So existing buildings of historical or cultural significance, the George Black House in Brickyard is an example of that. It's also one of our local historic landmarks. George Black was an African-American brick mason who made handmade bricks. He traveled around the world teaching people how to do that, and his bricks were used in many projects in the restoration of Old Salem and also in Colonial Williamsburg. Also, some of the older Wachovia Bank branches, like the one that's on Patterson Avenue, that's now a city building, and the one in the West End are made from George Black brick. So he was someone who was very significant locally. Both of those are also good examples of historic landscapes because of the George Black house in Brickyard. In back of the house, there is his brickyard that is still there. And of course, the Bethania Rural Hall Road area, it's not just about the buildings that are there, but it's about the landscape of the farmland and the gardens and how the houses relate to each other. Personal organization of historic or cultural significance. A marker we installed a few years ago is a good example of that because it honors B.F. Huntley, the man, and the B.F. Huntley Furniture Company. The furniture company was at one time the largest maker of bedroom furniture, I believe, in the South. It was eventually bought by Thomasville, and the factory still stands on Patterson Avenue. They're talking about that as the site for the new Brunson Elementary School. B.F. Huntley, the man, was involved in a lot of Baptist causes. He donated the land on which a part of Baptist Hospital is now located. He also was instrumental in the construction of First Baptist Church on 5th. He was a partial owner of the Robert E. Lee Hotel. So he may not have been a Haynes or a Reynolds, but he really made a stamp on the city in his time, but he's not as well remembered. So the marker allows us to celebrate some of that history. Finally, these are our lowest priority criteria. So a marker going in an underrepresented area means we don't have a lot of other markers near it. When I showed that map earlier that had all the cluster of red dots in downtown Winston-Salem, that's certainly where most of our markers are located. This marker was for the Y camps of Salem Chapel Township, which is sort of in the northeastern part of the county in an unincorporated area. They were located a mile or two kind of north and south of where the purple star is located on that map. And so that was a good sort of add to get another marker in that part of the county. A marker that had an impact on the current community is our Bowen Park marker. Bowen Park was an early subdivision that was built specifically for African-American buyers, just south of where the airport runways, I don't think they were there at the time, but where they've been extended to now. And there are a few people who were very early, if not original buyers, that are still alive, that still live in that community. And then there are other families where descendants are still living in the houses. And they wanted that history captured and celebrated while those early residents are still there and can talk about what their experience of being able to buy a home for the first time and the community that really developed in that neighborhood, what that was like. Impact on preservation, meaning sort of the fabric of historic preservation. The Philip and Joanna Haynes house, which is in Clemens, was wonderfully preserved and rehabilitated by its owner some years ago. And that is one of the two markers we have in Clemens. Certainly, again, the Haynes name is well known, but these were early Haynes residents in Forsyth County. And so the marker helped recognize that very early piece of our history. And then our last priority point is for applicants who've scored in the top 5 for 2 consecutive years, but not yet been awarded a marker. We have some applicants who've come 3, 4, 5 years in a row and not been awarded an applicant, or a marker. So we give them just a little tiny extra boost. So this is our scoring sheet from our 2019 markers, and it's really pretty simple. The scores in bold at the end are the total. We just sum up all of the marker scores, and the boxes to the left are the scores by each of the individual committee members. So our top 2 scorers in the city of Winston-Salem, and then our top scorer in an unincorporated part of Forsyth County are the sites that get awarded the markers that are funded by our local government. So once the markers have been awarded, staff drafts the marker text. So we start with the applicant's suggested text, but we read a bit more about the history. Does this really have the right focus? Does it tell the most important things that we want people to know about this site or history? we fact check it. And we fact check it again. We don't want to have a marker that has an incorrect name, an incorrect spelling, an incorrect date. But it's happened. That happened for the 14th Street School. And then someone who came to the unveiling for that event brought it up, and said, hey, that date's not correct. And so, we had to then but the planning department had to then pay for a new marker that had the correct date. So we learned a lesson. We're very careful about it. We do let our applicants review what we're proposing as the final marker text, just to be sure that there's not anything we're including that they think is wrong, or that we've changed sort of the thrust of what we're talking about away from what they had originally intended it to be. We work with the marketing and communications department in the city to have them look at our word choice, make sure that everything is meeting what the city's standards are for how we use language, make sure it's clear to a reader who is not a historian and used to necessarily reading this kind of stuff. And then our Historic Resources Commission reviews and approves the final text. CWA Studios is who we work with to actually create the markers. They're located in Ohio. So we have a good relationship with them. We email in an order that looks like the one on the left. And then when they actually get the marker laid out, they will take a photo of what they're going to cast and send it to us and make sure it's correct. And sometimes we do ask them to make changes, to put a line break in a different place, or something like that. We obviously check to make sure the art and the seals are correct, and that everything matches our order. And then they can show up on the city yard in a crate that looks like the one at the bottom. When we are going to actually figure out where to install the marker, we go out with somebody from the Department of Transportation in our sign shop. You can see him standing near the telephone pole there. And he'll mark the actual location and then call in to have the underground utilities marked. And when we go out and look for a marker site, we want to look at its visibility from the road or roads, make sure there aren't any obstructions, make sure there aren't any trees that are going to grow into the marker. That is something that has happened in numerous places around the city. And then we have to work with vegetation management to get the markers trimmed, or the trees trimmed, and in some cases repaint the markers. So we try to avoid trees. And also importantly, we don't want the markers to be located in an area where they're likely to get damaged during an accident, too close to the road. When we install a marker on a state highway or right-of-way, we do have to get an encroachment agreement from the state. Fortunately, there is an NCDOT office here in Winston-Salem that's relatively easy to work with, but we have to go through the process of requesting their permission. Then we do an unveiling. So we maintain a list of invitees that includes all of our elected officials, all of the commissions that are staffed out of the planning office, local history and historic preservation groups, media, and then whoever the applicant would like to include. So our in-house team puts together our invitations and our program. As I was saying earlier, I'm sure many of you have gotten invitations in the mail to our marker events because we make an effort to make sure that the CAC is included on those. This is the unveiling that we did for Lowman Pauling and the 5 Royales. It was a very hot day, which is why everyone is hiding in the shade of that magnolia tree. As the sun moved across the sky, people were moving their chairs back and into the shade. But we work with applicants to develop the program for what's going to happen at the unveiling. So often they'll start with an invocation and they'll end with a benediction, but we've had marching bands, we've had African drumming, we've had dancing, we've had libation ceremonies, we've had genealogy, we've had singing. We always have a member of our commission speak, and all the elected officials who are there usually will speak or be given the opportunity to speak. And then the applicant group will have a representative or two speak. Ideally, the event lasts no more than an hour or so, and usually they don't last longer than that, but they're a really wonderful opportunity to celebrate the history of our community, and they're a lot of fun. So during COVID, we couldn't do unveiling events, which was really sad. So we worked with really Ed McNeil, who's the head of marketing and communications for the city, who put together some short videos for us covering our marker subjects that we were awarded in 2020. And they've been really popular, and it's wonderful because it provides us with a little tool or a piece of history that we can share long after the marker has been installed and unveiled, rather than just having a static event. Although we are continuing to do unveilings, we're hoping that marketing might have the bandwidth to continue to do videos for us from time to time. So this is the video he did for the Haynes marker, and I am, if I can get my mouse to work, gonna play this for y'all.
There is more than a lifetime between these logos. One from today that represents Haynes Brands Incorporated's Haynes line, and this one representing P.H. Haynes Knitting Company just as they started selling underwear under their own name in 1914. But the story of P.H. Haynes Knitting being celebrated with a historic marker on 6th Street between Church and Main doesn't begin with a cotton ball spun into a garment. It begins with tobacco in the 1800s.
Here is a field of tobacco, a commodity whose sweet-smelling, enjoyable-tasting smoke has contributed to man's pleasure for centuries.
In 1872, at just 27 years old, Pleasant Henderson Haynes and his brothers John Wesley Haynes and Benjamin Franklin Haynes created P.H. Haynes and Company. They specialized in making the oldest form of tobacco, plug tobacco. It's made from the heavier grades of the plant. The tobacco was mixed with a syrup and compressed into a brick-like mass the size of a deck of cards. Pleasant found success in the tobacco industry, producing multiple brands, including one bearing his own nickname, Early Bird. The company supplied tobacco users until 1900, when Pleasant sold the company to R.J. Reynolds.
Well, Ples was never a smoker himself, and his wife, Mary Lazora Fortune Haynes from Texas, was a proud member of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. So she was adamantly opposed to anything like tobacco or alcohol related, and in fact, this is why he turned down an offer from Asa Candler to be an investor in Coca-Cola, because she did not like the cocaine component to Coca-Cola.
Now there's a soft drink from the Coca-Cola Company that makes it fun to be thirsty.
Rosalie Haynes Horton is Pleasant's great-great-granddaughter.
So they sat and ruminated and decided upon the underwear business as something that people use every day and that wasn't going to hurt them, but in fact help them in daily life.
Pleasant Henderson Haynes prepared for the new ventures present and future by sending his 21-year-old son, P. Huber Haynes, off to work in a textile mill in Mayodan. His job was to learn all he could about the business. And in 1902, Pleasant and his sons created P.H. Haynes Knitting with 50 sewing machines and 12 knitting machines in a building at 6th and Church Streets in downtown Winston-Salem. It went from a partnership to being incorporated in just a year. They had 150 workers and were steadily growing, satisfying men and boys' need for heavyweight knit shirts and underwear for the winter. They created their first union suits, the one-piece underwear, in 1913, but it was a year later before the buying public would hear the name P.H. Haynes Knitting. That's when Pleasant abandoned the model of only supplying products for private labels. They created a modest advertising budget and opened an ad agency in New York City and sold products under the Haynes brand for the first time.
This is New York, a miracle city, a city of tall buildings, narrow dark streets, magnificent parks, broad avenues, homes and schools, stores and theaters and palatial hotels. A fascinating city, an incredible city, the commercial, financial, trading, and cultural heart of a great nation, the United States of America.
While spending time in the Empire State, Pleasant gained an appreciation for Central Park and the emerging urban park effort that had begun around the country. He brought that effort to Winston-Salem, where he donated 50 acres of land to city government for a public park, Haynes Park, as a gift commemorating the merger of Winston and Salem in 1913. From 1916 to 1918, the Haynes brand became a significant contributor to the World War I effort in supplying underwear for the U.S. government. They could not provide Haynes branded products for the public during the war, but within a week of the armistice, the company had enough commitments to claim the next 10 months of production. P.H. Haynes Knitting grew with the town. It was a growing employer in 1920 when Winston-Salem was the largest city in the state, and under Pleasant's leadership, it grew to more than 5,000 employees. Not only was the company buying millions of dollars in cotton from North Carolina farmers, paying taxes into the community, and sending its leadership to sit on several boards and commissions, both around the city and the state, but it was also generously providing for its employees. The Haynes workforce enjoyed a rich benefit package. P.H. Haynes Knitting paid the full cost of the employee pension plan, no matching requirement for employees. Health care, paid. Vacations, holidays, unemployment, and workers' compensation, all provided 100% by the company.
Because it was the right thing to do. And P.H. Haynes was the opposite of a robber baron and a greed is good capitalist. On the contrary, he truly believed that business and industry were first and foremost a public service, and that the goal should be to uplift the prosperity of the entire community, line everybody's pockets and not just his own. And that was quite different from the prevailing ethos of the day. So he was not about exploiting the labor force to eke out more profits or compromising the quality of the product ever. And he knew it was better business to have a partnership with labor instead of to be antagonistic to them, because frankly, he was so appreciative of all of the hard work. He knew that that's what made the business probably more than he did. So he was always about showing gratitude to the workers and increasing the benefits package as quickly as they could.
Pleasant ran the business until his death at 79 years old in 1925. His eldest son, P. Huber Haynes, the one he sent off to work in the textile mills in Mayodan, had been the vice president and general manager. His experience in the mill was key in his years of leadership from 1925 to 1956. During his time, P.H. Haynes Knitting continued to sell to the U.S. government, turning out well over 40 million garments for the Army, Navy, and Marines, an effort that earned them the coveted E for Excellence award for never missing a shipment or having defects. The company had more than 17 acres of production space under roof in Winston-Salem in 1938 with 4 plants and was on the state's honor roll for sanitation and good working conditions. However, the demand for the product by civilians after the war led to Huber expanding by having plants built in Sparta and Jefferson, North Carolina, and Galax, Virginia. When P. Huber Haynes Sr. retired in 1954, his son, P. Huber Haynes Jr., became the 3rd generation to run the company. After his first full year, they recorded a 21% increase in sales, the best in the company's history. In 1963, sales were in excess of $45 million, almost twice what it had been in 1950, and it continued to grow with plants being built in Texas and New Mexico. Huber Haynes Jr., an accomplished athlete, also contributed to the culture of the company through the creation of a company recreation program. It included golfing, fishing, bowling, square dances, rodeos, big barbecues, and picnics. The company was expanding its culture from the walls of its massive brick buildings into the leisure time of its 9,200 employees, and all of it was being documented by the in-house magazine, The Haynes Knitter. Successive years under Huber Jr. saw growth, including a plant being built in Davie County and an eventual merger with Haynes Hosiery Mills to create the Haynes Corporation. Rosalie is pleased with seeing the story captured in the marker.
The 3 generations of Haynes men who ran the business ran it with an open hand and not an iron fist. And that's a legacy that the community can be proud of civic and industrial largesse, and we are too. So we're glad that a little bit of the story is now being told.
Historic markers tell the story of how a piece of property was once used and its impact. This one on 6th Street between Main and Church Streets stands where almost 120 years ago, you could likely smell tobacco in the air, see men and women emerging from the brick buildings with cotton dust in their hair, making a product that was needed then and now all over the world. And still today, if you see this marker, you can look up
and see the remaining portion of one of the smokestacks of P.H. Haynes Knitting Company.
Or a converted factory building, now apartments, still sporting the H for Haynes. For the city of Winston-Salem, I'm Ed McNeil.
So, as I said, I thought marketing did a really fantastic job on putting that video together. And I think it's actually going to be aired on North Carolina Public Television some point later on this year, which is great. So it's going to get an even broader audience. We do budget for replacements of markers, 1 a year. Each marker costs approximately $2,500. This is the Double Springs AME Zion church site and cemetery, which is a marker that's out in the county that had to be replaced last year. Got the pole, we think, got hit by a mower. The P.H. Haynes marker has actually already had to be relocated because the site where we had it was too close to the street, and within the first 6 months of being up, it was hit by a truck of some kind. So we're moving it now around the corner onto Main Street. But you know, things can happen where the markers get damaged, and even though if someone else hits it and damages it, they really should be the ones paying to replace it. Usually they let them fall to the ground, and you know, we get a report from a citizen about the need to go pick it up and replace it. We do award self-funded markers. So when marker applicants apply for an application, we ask them to include an affidavit that says, or not an affidavit, but an addendum to the application that says, if you are not awarded one of the government-funded markers, are you interested in having a self-funded marker? And we can award up to 2 self-funded markers a year. Again, each of the markers costs about $2,500. So Ronaldo Park, that was an example of a self-funded marker. They were not one of our 2 highest scoring markers in the city last year, but they wanted to move forward with the self-funded marker. They have to meet the same standards as all of our government-funded markers. The primary difference is that when we place the order with CWA, instead of CWA sending the bill to us, they direct bill the applicant. We also say that we don't do unveiling events for self-funded markers, but here we are at an unveiling event for Ronaldo Park. So that frequently doesn't work out that well. They are smaller in scale. Generally, we don't do programs and mail out invitations and all of that for the self-funded markers, but we do work with applicants to help get elected officials. We're present for the program. Dan was there volunteering for this marker event, which was lovely. You know, get chairs, do all the sort of event logistics. We do assist with that sometimes. So, you know, this one we had the County Commissioner Kaplan, Councilmember McIntosh, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, and the mayor come, which is great because, again, we like to have the support of our elected officials and have them be aware of the things that we're doing. We also, after the marker's been installed, develop one-page information sheets that allow us to tell a little bit more history than we can actually include on the marker itself and include illustrations. Our hope in the future is that we will actually be able to develop a QR code that'll be on a separate sign that'll go on the post of the marker. So people who are out in the community with their phone could scan their QR code, and then it would either take them to this page or something else that we developed that allows people to get a more full sense of the history of the marker. So this is a marker info sheet that we did for First Baptist Church. This is the African-American First Baptist Church that still exists now east of 52, but originally was located in the Depot Street neighborhood. And finally, this is probably the best press that we've gotten about a historic marker in the time I've been working for the city. This was on the cover of the Winston-Salem Journal. Again, this is for Loman Pauling and the Five Royales. This is his son, Daryl, who was successful in getting a marker awarded for the family home where Loman lived, and where many famous musicians came and practiced and played with the band. So the marker program is a wonderful way to build goodwill for our commission, to develop good relationships with our elected officials, to get people involved in the history of Forsyth County and Winston-Salem. And I think all of us, whether it's staff or people who serve on the commission, would say this is the most fun part of what we do. Coming to the marker committee meeting is usually a feel-good event, and you just want to award a marker to everyone. And it's unfortunate that we can't do that. But, you know, I guess that's the price of success. So that is all I have for you all. I will stop sharing. And if y'all have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Or if not, that's fine too.
I do have a question, Heather. Is there a way that you can share this presentation just via email so we can kind of take a closer look at, because it was kind of a lot, and I do want to go back, you know, making a historic marker for LGBTQ community sound really interesting, you know, for me being a part of it as well. So, and apparently it is on your top priority list. So this is something I would definitely look into it personally.
Yes, I would be happy to. I'll send it to Amy and Dan, and then they can distribute it to the commission. You know, that the LGBTQ history of Winston-Salem is something that has not been talked about by the Historic Resources Commission at all. I'm not aware of any resources in Winston-Salem that have been designated or listed on the National Register where that history has been captured. So, you know, I think our commission and committee would certainly welcome a marker application for that subject.
Well, great. Thank you, Heather, again.
You're welcome.
Have a great presentation. I do have a question. This is Brenda.
Hi.
Hi. For the PR codes, do you know how soon that will be available?
We haven't yet gotten approval to do that. It's something that we've just kind of talked about as staff internally. But our goal would be to add that to our work program. And then it wouldn't be, if all we're going to link to is our marker information pages, that wouldn't really be that hard. It would be amazing if we could build something bigger so that, like with the Loman Pauling marker, we could have a link where you could hear his music, you know, or that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But that's a lot more complicated, and it requires a level of IT support that we don't really have. So we'd have to get approval for something like that because it would cost money through the city council, but it's something we've talked about putting on our work program, and I hope we'll be able to do that in the next few years.
So the basic, just to have the PR code with the fact sheet, would that be possible in the near future?
I hope so. I will cross my fingers. We develop our work program, you know, by fiscal year. So we'll see. We've been, the current planning director, Aaron King, is now an interim assistant city manager. And we have a few ideas for things we'd like to do. Another one is street sign toppers in some of our historic neighborhoods that are not designated as historic districts, or maybe couldn't be designated as historic districts, but a way to recognize them as historic neighborhoods that are cohesive. That's another idea that we have, and he suggested that we look at, developing cost and come up with a proposal, and then we'll work with him on hopefully bringing that to the committees and then before council. So we could certainly add the QR code signs as part of that, because it's really a similar kind of thing. They're both related to installing street signs on existing infrastructure.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
So I had a quick question, and that sign topper sounds like it might be a good solution for what I'm going to ask, but the difference between a historic district and a historic marker, like specifically, I guess I'm asking about West Highlands, which is often confused with West End, but has its own history. And, would that be a better thing to do, that kind of topper idea or a marker?
In terms of marking the land, I think staff's view is yes, that the street sign toppers are a better way to recognize that, because if you put them on all of the street signs that are within a district, people get a sense of the scope and how big a district is, whereas a historic marker only goes in one place. However, we do have historic neighborhoods like Oakcrest that was mentioned earlier, Reynoldstown. I don't know if we have one for West End, but we do have several historic neighborhoods in the city that have a historic marker as well, which lets you tell a little bit of the history about the neighborhood. And they're usually put at one of the main entrances to the neighborhood or sort of a central location. So the historic marker program right now, because it's already developed, would already be an option for West Highlands. You all could put in a marker application, and we could go from there. The street sign toppers are something that we are really hoping, because we have been asked by so many people in the community for ways to recognize history for neighborhoods that are not designated. Like West Highlands hasn't been listed in the National Register. It's not a local historic district. So how can we recognize that history? And that would be a very easy and kind of low-hanging fruit way to do that. So if you hear that we're getting a program like that in the future, then we'll probably be the people that you would reach out to about that. But in the meantime, a marker certainly you could apply for.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I want to add to John's comment regarding West Highlands. As a realtor, I do know about that area. And it is true that not only people mix it up with West End, or some other, but like it's now kind of like a lot of agents that list homes there. They market it as Buena Vista, which has nothing to do with it. And it kind of is losing its identity. Identity. I wouldn't say maybe history, but identity definitely. So I think John is onto something. And I think this is something that is really good to look into. Just wanted to add, sorry.
Well, that's an interesting comment that you make, because Oakcrest, that marker we unveiled earlier this year, that marker was really installed because of the efforts of one man who grew up in Oakcrest. His family, they were not original buyers, but they were very early. He still lives in his parents' home. And he said when people would ask him where he lived, he'd say the neighborhood by Wake Forest. It's the area of Polo Road that's just a little west of Wake. And it didn't really have a name. And he was cleaning his parents' attic out, and he found a corsage that said Oakcrest Florist that had been his sister's from going to some dance. And he said, I thought to myself, why doesn't anybody call this Oakcrest anymore? Why have people stopped using this name? Do people not remember this neighborhood? And they since have created Historic Oakcrest, which is a neighborhood group, and they've really done a lot to kind of recapture and remember the history of Oakcrest and its development, because they were experiencing that same kind of loss of geographic identification or neighborhood identity. So
yeah, and there's actually quite a few around town. One of them I can just name you. I don't know if any one of you heard of Hoodstown. It is basically, if you know where Old Salisbury Road is, between Trademark Boulevard, if you think, and before you get to the next Ardmore Road. So that entire area used to be called Hoodstown. And there, like, if on some maps, it even says that on like some navigation GPS systems, and like I've tried to research it. I've even asked some people who lived there for, last 50, 60 years, and they've heard of it, but no one really knows. So I live there. We do have a lot of owls. But I really do want to look into it and investigate a little more, but honestly really having a hard time finding any information about it. That's it. Sorry.
It could be related to the Hoots family down where the porch is. That building, it's Hoots Roller Mill, and so maybe it was related to that, but I don't know. It's just a guess.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any more questions for Heather? Okay. Well,
thank y'all for having me. I appreciate it. And I will send that presentation out, and Dan and Amy can get it to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, that's great. We'll go ahead and move along with our meeting. Next item on our docket is the approval of summary minutes. I've got two sets of minutes to approve. One from all the way back from May 26th of this year, and another one from our last meeting on August 25th. So does anyone have any comments or revisions to make on the minutes? Okay, if there are no comments or revisions, I guess to approve would require a motion from a member and a second as well. So
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as written.
Okay, thanks, Brenda.
I'm Tasha Wilson. I second.
Okay, thanks. We'll go ahead and proceed with a roll call vote to approve both of these sets of minutes. First, John Coyne.
Approve.
Second, Curtis Walker.
He had to leave.
Oh, he left. Okay. Salvador Patino. It's not here. That's right. George Edwards.
I approve.
Okay. Ninka Gupta. Brittany Clinton Hill. Brenda Fulmore.
Approved.
Okay. Tasha Wilson.
Yes.
Okay. John Rothling. Ethany Good.
Approve.
Anton Musaf.
Approve.
Thanks. Amanda King. And finally, Judith Hotchkiss.
Approve.
Okay. Okay, yeah, unfortunately, I think we lack quorum now.
It's fine since we started the meeting with a quorum.
Okay, is it? Okay, thank you, Amy. Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure about that. Okay, okay, motion carries. So we'll go ahead, the minutes are approved. Next item on our agenda, the committee reports. Not too much new activity from the committees. The TAPR committee did not meet in October since there were no projects submitted for that review cycle. And additionally, I believe today is technically the due date for the next project review cycle for the TAPR committee. So Amy, did we receive any submittals as of today or?
No, I just checked, make sure nobody came in in the meeting, and no, nothing's come in. So it looks like the TAPR committee meeting in November will also be canceled.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Amy. Okay. And the next up, Education and Awards Committee also did not meet earlier today. And it's also currently staff's intention that we also cancel the upcoming meeting for this committee, which is scheduled for December 1st. The reason being that our awards program, of course, isn't scheduled until 2023. So this committee, unless there's any objections from the CAC, also won't meet until next year. Similarly, with Trees and Woodlands, also did not meet in October. Its November meeting was also canceled. This is, of course, due, as Amy mentioned during our last meeting, because we canceled Community Roots Day for this year. So I guess we will kind of gauge the nature of the pandemic as we move our calendar towards the next year. And this committee will probably reconvene in early part of spring of 2022 to hopefully get together for planning the Community Roots Day for the fall of that year. And I don't have any news or report from our ad hoc Gateway Committee, which I think is down to one member. So we may have to recrew that committee next year. Next up on our docket, Anton or Tasha, do either of you have an official report for the commission?
I don't think so.
Official report.
Fair enough. I don't think we have any old business from our last meeting. The one item of new business we have is the renewal of the Memorandum of Understanding that our CAC board has with the Winston-Salem Recreation and Parks Department. This is a document that is supposed to be renewed every 2 years, so we are due for a renewal. And I'd like to spend a few minutes just kind of reviewing what this document's about, if that's all right with the board. What the document does, it basically streamlines the approval of park shelters that are built by the Parks Department. Broadly speaking, it allows the Parks Department to construct 2 different types of park shelters. One with kind of an engineered lumber product as its primary material, and the other made out of steel. And these are really, really simple gable roof, open-ended, usually no walls, park shelters. And the idea here is that we don't clog up TAPR's docket with kind of repetitive projects that all look fairly similar to one another. And in reviewing the MOU, there are both site guidelines of how the park shelters are to be situated, as well as aesthetic requirements. The site requirements are that the shelters are to be placed so that no existing trees are harmed or removed. The Parks Department is also supposed to provide trees at the south and west sides of these buildings so that they don't get blasted with summer sun. The shelters are also to be sited so as to minimize the probability of vandalism. The Parks Department is also to provide concrete or asphalt walkway that's also ADA accessible to these shelters. And some of the aesthetic, these are more guidelines than requirements. 2 guidelines are that the shelter should be appropriate in scale, relative to the neighborhood and park, and also creatively designed. A more concrete requirement is that the floors of the shelters are to be constructed with poured concrete, stone, or brick. And finally, if the shelters do have electrical components like lights or outlets, which many of them do, that the conduit and electrical components should be installed so as to be discrete. And also, if you have a moment, I'll share my screen real quick and share some examples of what these type of structures look like. This will just take a minute. Again, these are, can everyone see my screen okay, or?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, here's an example of a shelter in Blum or Blanding Park, which is constructed with a laminated lumber material. This shelter happens to have an end wall or small structural masonry component at the end of it. Here's an example of a steel shelter in Oak Summit Park that's open-ended. And finally, here is an example of a steel shelter that's situated around the Rupert Bell Neighborhood Center, the park that surrounds that neighborhood center. That's, I guess, our MOU in a nutshell. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the MOU? Okay. Well, I guess we'll to renew this. I think we need a movement from a member and a second as well.
Move to approve. Judy.
Okay. Thanks, Judy.
Second, John Quinn.
Okay. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Okay. We'll proceed with a roll call vote. John Coyne.
Approved.
Okay. Curtis Walker. I don't think he's here. Salvador Patino. George Edwards.
Approve.
Thanks, George. Maninka Gupta. Brittany Clinton Hill. Brenda Fulmore.
Approved.
Tasha Wilson.
Approved.
John Rothling. Ethne Good.
Approve.
Thanks, Ethne. Anton Musov.
Approve.
And Amanda King. And finally, Judith Hotchkiss.
Approve.
Okay. So this passes unanimously. I think Anton will need to get with you at some point to sign off on the actual memorandum, the hard copy. So I'll coordinate that with you by email later.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Anton. A few other items I had of business. I don't want to put the commission on the spot right now, but you could definitely all start shouting out answers if you'd like. If you have ideas for guest speakers that you'd like to have in the future, feel free to share them right now, or could also email myself or Amy with those ideas, and we'd be happy to try to coordinate those speakers in the new year.
I do have a question. What type of speakers are we looking for?
I would say that they should generally be in line with what the Community Appearance Commission concerns itself with. So something to do with like built form or appearance, aesthetics issues in the community. But I certainly wouldn't want to limit the topics either. Like I think we can be fairly open-ended in the kinds of guest speakers we accept. So
any type of urban renewal type things, urbanization?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Usually we try to get either folks that are within the city or the county doing a certain project just to inform y'all of a program or a project that's going on, or if there's a particular concern. We've had NCDOT and their landscape program come in and discuss that because that was a particular concern. We've had folks from their NCDOT litter program. So if there's a particular concern that you wanted information on how something is handled or a project, or you just bring someone in to say, this is an outside organization that's doing great work, and maybe there could be a potential partnership there that we could help them with, anything like that.
So are these free speakers or are they compensated?
They're free.
Yeah. No per diem.
All right, thank you.
Okay. no one else has any ideas they'd like to shout out. One other thing, just a quick reminder that we do still have two vacancies within the CAC membership body for Forsyth County specifically. And I believe both those vacancies are categorical. So if anyone has anyone in mind or knows anyone, definitely send them my way and we can assist them with kind of directing them as to how the approval process works. Our meetings will continue to be virtual for the foreseeable future, I suppose. And honestly, I haven't talked about this with Amy, but given that if we don't have any TAPR projects that roll in within the next day or two, I'm not sure if we'll have the December meeting or not for CAC. Unless there's objections from the board or Amy, what do you think about that?
If we don't really have any business that needs to be discussed beyond approval of the minutes, I don't see a reason to take up y'all's time and as well as take up the city marketing department's time and having a live stream meeting. Minutes can be pushed back and approved when there actually is something that needs to be addressed in some manner. This time, this month it was the MOU, whether it's a TAPR project, and then we'll try to coordinate our speakers, having folks come in during those meetings as well to really sort of kind of make them a bit more robust. And so they're not just, 10-minute meetings. But yeah, until we get off Zoom, whenever that will happen, I have no idea when that will happen, but that's probably how we'll go.
Great. I think that's the extent of what I had, and that's the kind of the end of the agenda. So I certainly appreciate everyone's time this afternoon. Thank you so much. And unless there are any comments from our members, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
I just want to say to you, Amy and Dan, for doing what you do. And I can't wait for the moment to where we can meet again. Thank you, guys. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great night. You too. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.